Welcome to the Daily Exchange. We're here with my friend Wouter. We're going to talk institutions investing in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and the market rallying up. EOS as well, the CSIRO, bit of Bitcoin, bit of blockchain, bit of institution, wrap it all up and you get a good bit of Daily Exchange. I'll see you guys right after this. All right, guys, we're back. I'm in Arctic winter mode. Australia has gone freezing cold. The cryptocurrency market, on the other hand, is heating up. Wouter, do you own any cryptocurrency by any chance?
I don't own any.
No cryptocurrency. He's a no-coiner. He is the no-coiner. We're going to work to change that. We're going to talk about Wouter is from the Investment Innovation Institute, I3. He's all about, you've been obviously deep in institutional investors. You understand how they sort of roll. I'm going to ask you your comments as we go along, and then we're going to get deep into an interview. How do you feel about that?
Sounds good.
Let's get into it. Bitcoin trading still above 7,000. Joel, bring us up the map. It looks a little red, but realistically, we're just trading sideways. $7,054 for Bitcoin, Ethereum at 289, Ripple at 34 cents, Cardano at, I can't quite see that price. Is it 12 cents? EOS is the big flyer right now. EOS flying up. We were up about 6%, up to $6.23. $6.23. That's incredible. That's 17% up in the last day or so. Do you like EOS, Wouter?
I don't know much about EOS, but it's going up, so I think that's a good thing.
If you were going to buy, would you buy EOS or Ethereum? Just purely on the name.
Well,
it's like a horse, you know? Like, which horse would you go for?
Purely on the name. I know that Ethereum has the ability to incorporate smart contracts, which I think has...
EOS does a similar kind of thing.
Okay, well then, what's going up, you buy. Follow the trend.
There it is. There it is. Follow the trend, guys. Recently this week as well, the EOS core team has introduced a fix for their RAM. Major issue. This was earlier in the week. I'm not sure if this correlated with the price or not. It is unclear as such. But it was unveiled earlier this week. It's a quick fix for the RAM issue. Check it out. That's a big deal. Bitcoin Cash, obviously the fork right now, major issues. The hash rate of Bitcoin has gone up. Has this been Bitcoin Cash miners moving over to Bitcoin? That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you think do you like Bitcoin Cash?
Bitcoin Cash. I don't own it. I don't own Bitcoin, so I don't know.
Wouter's not a Bitcoin Cash kind of guy. I understand that. I can totally appreciate that. We're looking at potential, just talk about the quote here from Roger Ver. We're all going to sit down in person and talk about exactly what we think as miners should be the future for this, and I think things will probably be settled by that. Sit downs are good. Do you like sitting down, having a chat? Have you had really, contentious conversation that could break a whole company up in two and split them like a fork?
Not really like that. No.
Not your kind of conversations.
No.
That's nice.
I think because from a journalist background, we like to talk all the time about lots of different issues and have controversial...
Are there any institutions that are splitting right now? Like, they divest something or they're cutting themselves up into two?
No, it's more the other way around. They're bringing some of the asset management in-house, so they're becoming bigger and incorporating more different
That's going the other way.
Yes.
Well, everything in cryptocurrency seems to be splitting apart. There's divorces everywhere. Forks galore. Let's move on. Stellar, down 3%. The Stellar Dolphin hard fork, XMD, is scheduled to occur sometime in the next 24 hours. It comes from Stellar Lumen Commonwealth, one of the 3 key XLM development teams. So there's many development teams working on the Stellar blockchain, which is incredible. XLM holders are eligible for one-to-one airdrop, which is kind of cool. But many in the community are dubious and talk of it as being banned from the Stellar subreddit. Wow, you can't talk about it.
No.
Getting banned. Decentralized banning. All right, we're not here to say if it's good or bad, just to remind you guys, obviously do your own research. This is not financial advice. Wouter, this has nothing to do with financial advice on this show.
No, absolutely not.
Like, we are not suggesting that Wouter buy Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin, EOS, Ethereum, anything like that. And definitely, guys, do your own research on that. Meanwhile, XLM recently hit records after a whopping 48.75 billion worth of Stellar assets were traded on-chain in August. Stellar is heating up. Heating up. It's cooking. Let's talk about Tron. It's down 5%. The virtual machine, the Tron virtual machine, launch looms. The Tron community is debating maximum token supply, with many concerned that going beyond 100 billion max TRX supply in the next year or two could lead to downward price trends.
Doesn't sound good, does it?
Oh, there's a launch event going on right now. Let's bring it up. Bring up the launch event, Joel. Spin it up for us so we can watch along a little bit. Here we are, live on YouTube, direct with love from. Oh God, we need to plug in some cables. But there is. It's going on live, Joel. If you want to share it out, the Tron Virtual Machine launch event is happening right now. We'll let everyone else be able to hear this as well. Just give us 2 seconds. We're back. Joel, the mystery hand, coming in from the side of the seams. There is this live. So this is the guy behind Tron. He's like a pretty waxy. He has an 8-year plan. Pretty kind of cool. And they're launching the virtual machine, which is pretty much going to power a lot of what Tron does. And it's kind of a big deal, really. They're trying to replace the internet.
They will work on Project Atlas.
All right, let's move on. TRX has got listed on KuCoin, and the Tron Wallet Me app is now available on the iOS store. Obviously, Tron recently bought BitTorrent. I don't know if that's a pretty wacky thing to go and buy, right? Pretty decentralized. All right, let's move on. Word up, my man.
Yes.
Here with me. Let's talk about a bit of background. You were the content director of the investment, or you are the content director of the Investment Innovation Institute, and you were the founding editor of the Insto Report.
Yes.
You were also the former editor of Morningstar-owned publication Investor Weekly. You've obviously been around investment, journalism, finance for quite a while now. You recently hosted a talk with the RBA. Tony Richards, head of payment policy. Tony, if you're watching, we still love you. Spoke to cryptocurrencies, and he was very skeptical about the success of cryptocurrencies. Can you talk us through Tony's view? What's Tony thinking about cryptocurrencies right now?
Yeah, so they're coming from two different ways. One way they look at it as a payment platform, and one of it as a potential investment asset. So from a payment perspective, they probably look at it and say, well, why do we need this? We already have digital forms of currency. We just launched a new payment platform which should allow for real-time payments. Cryptocurrencies are basically not necessary. And then the other aspect is that as an investment, they look at it, well, what's its value? It's not backed by anything. It's relatively unregulated. So if it fails, there's no recourse. It's been very volatile, so they look at it as a speculative investment and as a currency. So not too positive at the moment.
Not very positive by the RBA, not much positivity. RBA pretty unhappy. Unfortunately, they can't seem to be able to move their interest rates right now, otherwise the economy will collapse. Not sure how they got themselves into that situation, nor... Has anyone used the NPP? Have you used the NPP?
I've set up my alias, but I haven't used it actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Neither have I. My bank hasn't enabled it. Anyway, moving on. Just in the same vein of people like not enjoying the need or expressing the need for cryptocurrency, John Belfort of the Wolf of Wall Street, he has a clip on CNBC telling everyone, we're going to spin the clip up and let's see if it's got any parallels to Tony himself about how he feels.
I was a scammer. I was the first to admit. I understand the seedy underbelly.
Jordan Belfort, aka the Wolf of Wall Street. If you've seen the film, you know he served nearly 2 years in prison for securities fraud and money laundering. But he now says he's a changed man, and he's sounding the alarm.
I always say most of my firm was legitimate, but there was a portion of my firm that wasn't. Okay, and that portion was based on the manipulation of stocks. And I had it down to a science, and it's exactly what's happening with Bitcoin. There's two things that dictate manipulation. Number one, you have to be able to create demand. Back in the day, I had an army of people, and they would call around the country and the world and convince people to buy stocks. And now what you have is they create demand by social media. Now that's all fine and well, but the only way you can actually manipulate something is if you also control supply. In Bitcoin especially, very large percent is owned by a small number of accounts. We don't even know how bad it really is. For the average person who's really, with a good heart, who walks in saying, I do it because I believe in it, in the long-term thing, just run.
So Jordan was the man who basically got institutions to do some pretty wacky stuff, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of skepticism, and I guess there's a common perception that institutions are very skeptical and things like that. But how would you say, what's your personal view of how institutions are feeling? We've seen a lot of, I guess there's potentially some optimism as well, at least a lot of great interest. Where would you sort of place the interest level of cryptocurrency right now for institutions?
Yeah, I find it interesting to see, because recently we saw one big sovereign wealth fund in Singapore, GIC. They were part of this funding round into a Bitcoin miner. So they're going into the hardware, but it's obviously still a company that's very much exposed to the cryptocurrency industry. So there is some interest there. But at the same time, when you talk to investors, they always come back to one thing, and that is, what is the intrinsic value? What is this thing worth? And they don't seem to be able to answer that question, because they don't see any assets backing it. They don't see what moves it up and down. So they look at it as a relatively speculative asset, kind of like gold, but then less shiny.
Less shiny, more electrical. So there are obviously security tokens coming out, and obviously there are some coins out there that have dividends and things like that. Is that on the institution's radar right now, security tokens and that?
I think they're more interested in the blockchain technology behind it. So there is currently a pilot going on with 50 or 60 of the largest banks in the world that look at trading bonds over blockchain. And there seem to be some promising results there. I think once they get sorted out the speed issues and the computer power, then that would be a viable thing that they're interested in, and potentially then investing in the companies and the ecosystem around it.
Totally.
I think that's more where they're focusing on.
So there's a lot of reluctance right now by institutions. Obviously, this market's very retail-driven first, and then institutions, which is really interesting in and of itself. What's your take, I guess, on the traditional crowd? What would you say are the biggest barriers? What are your top 3 barriers sort of preventing institutions sort of getting into the market?
Yeah, so a lack of determining value. I think part of it is also the extreme volatility and the speculative nature of the asset class. We talked a little bit about correlations, and one of the holy grails is to find something that is not correlated to equities, not correlated to bonds. But you still need to determine what it's worth, and you have to have a clear process to show, what am I doing here? One of the big focus for especially the pension funds in Australia is governance. And the Royal Commission is on, they have to show what they're doing. It's very hard to determine in a cryptocurrency to make the case why they invest in that particular asset. So that is an issue there. And then there's also the regulatory side. It's relatively lowly regulated. So if it does blow up, they have no recourse.
Totally, I hear. I guess Intercontinental Exchange, ICE, that owns the New York Stock Exchange, just recently unveiled plans to form a new company backed to launch a physical one-day delivered futures contract, which is kind of cool, for Bitcoin, determining the price of Bitcoin. We obviously have the CME right now with the futures contract, but the New York Stock Exchange, that's a pretty traditional, corporation. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's going to happen to investors in Australia?
I don't know, because you're looking at derivatives basically of the cryptocurrency, and there is already some hesitance of using derivatives really widely in institutional portfolios. There is of course some in hedge funds, there's some in potentially tail hedge strategies, but it basically comes back to the original asset. If you don't really know how to value a cryptocurrency, then you're not going to buy the derivative either.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I guess in terms of pricing, it might help with, I guess, hedging and things like that. And I guess potentially that could help with moving money around the world and things like that. So potentially there's some other avenues of the usage of that. People who raise money in these cryptocurrencies and hedging and things like that. Do you see the parallels between a lot of the traditional techniques and tools and those people who have been in those industries coming across into cryptocurrency? Is there any sort of talk about that?
Not so much that, but I think there is definitely a lot more interest in technological disruption. And they do use that as themes within their portfolio. And probably they have looked more at traditional spaces like retailers and how Amazon is disrupting that space. I think this is something that they probably keep an eye on to make sure, as you know, sometimes we talk about black swan events, something that is very unlikely to happen but has a massive impact when it does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe they keep more of an eye from that perspective on cryptocurrencies.
Woody, do you think I'm a bit of a black swan?
Well, you're wearing a lot of black, but I think you're more a Viking, aren't you?
I am on my Viking day. It is Viking Day here at Finder in the studio in 99 York. Wouter has joined me direct from Viking Holland in Viking Sydney to talk about Viking cryptocurrency. All right, let's move on. That is awesome stuff, Wouter. I really love that. Now, there's some interesting science right now. You know, CSIRO, Data61, IBM, Herbert Smith Freehills has sort of formed this Australian national blockchain, this new smart contract, you know, for what they're sort of, the use case they talked about is, you know, a load of, you know, minerals comes through and it gets checked via the blockchain that it's arrived, and now the payment can be released by the bank. So, you know, there are these systems of trust that could be interconnected together. It's sort of, I guess, this is what you're talking about in terms of the technological disruption of a lot of companies. And again, I think what you're talking about before is another interesting theme of what are the companies that are going to be, I guess, almost hurt more than the ones that are going to really flourish, because that's probably even harder to determine to some extent.
Yeah.
Are there any major companies or major, you know, corporations that people go, you know, in institutions going, wow, that's a technology or that's a company that potentially has a lot of potential, you know, I'd be really worried about, or they're keeping a close eye on?
I'm not sure in terms of companies, but I think one of the aspects that is really interesting is where the blockchain technology applies to clearing and settlement of stocks or funds. So the ASX has basically launched this program where they're looking whether they can use blockchain to do some of that trade on settlement. And of course, because some of this still takes a couple of days, and blockchain has the potential to make that real time. I think where they find most interest is not so much in the public blockchains, but in the more proprietary, where they can control the network and make it part as almost like an industry-wide network. Especially on the custodial space, I know in the US there is an organization, DTCC, that looks at how they can incorporate blockchain. So from that perspective, they see the application there. And then from an investment point of view, I think once this is a more proven system, then obviously there's companies there that will benefit from that.
Totally. So let's talk about like jobs right now. Deloitte did a survey in July with the major executives saying 72% of the organization would see blockchain as a strategic priority. And jobs listings have skyrocketed. And the RMIT is obviously launching a new short course. Are there courses and education in institutions right now? Is that a growing demand that you're seeing?
So within some of the institutional investors, they have quant teams, quantitative analysts, that looking at price drivers. And I think there is a lot of interest in what some of these technologies can do there. I think the interest at this point is probably more machine learning and artificial intelligence rather than really the blockchain, because I think they look at blockchain more as an infrastructure rather than you know, the next big thing that they're going to invest in.
Cool. Very cool. All right, guys, we might leave it there. Wouter, thank you so much for joining us. Just in terms of finishing up with prices, Bitcoin trading at $7,029, Ethereum at $287, EOS at $6.16, Ripple at 34 cents, Bitcoin Cash at $552. $552.
That sounds good.
It's very interesting. Wouter, is there any final things you wanted to bring and say hello to everyone out there in terms of any final words of wisdom from the institutional side of town?
I think it's always a good point to do your research. Make sure you understand before you do any type of investing. And I think cryptocurrencies, it definitely seems to be almost too big to go away. but I think it's always good to remain slightly skeptical.
Skeptical is always a good place to be. Wouter, thank you so much. Investment Innovation Institute, the i3, a great set of publications and courses. Do check them out. And thanks so much for joining us. And guys, thank you so much for joining us again on the Daily Exchange. And do subscribe, do join us, and tell your friends all about the Daily Exchange. We'll see you guys tomorrow.